Oh. Paul from Chicago. Broke puns? Really? Really? Broke puns? That is what we're going with. I don't know. Ay, caramba. Heel's been wearing a shirt. Let's see. Probably better if I leave it like that, actually. Alright, let's see if this is working. Oh, good lord, that's a lot of advertising coming up. Hello, howdy. How is everyone doing? What is the pun? Well, we're hoping to avoid the pun. We really are. So, first of all, check. Can we all hear me? Hello. Hello. Right, so that's good. You can all hear me. This is what I want to know, and this is the good thing. Right, I'm just freaked out by something to my left, so I'm going to hide it a bit. Right, so we've got a couple of minutes to go before I start, but I thought I'd quickly start in as I was sitting here ready and check you're all okay. Audio is about half a second desynced. I have no idea why. That's just life, I've decided at the moment. We from Stephen. Alright then. More important thing. I've got a small chocolate brownie. That is lunch, by the way. Keep me going for all of you. Right. So today, I have got 30 Admirals. Well, technically 29 Admirals and a Commodore, which have been prepared. Now, I don't think I'm going to get through all of them. But I am planning to get through at least through 22, which are the ones who have managed to print out well from the printer after much coaxing. Admiral Duncan is going to be involved today. Don't worry, Admiral Duncan makes an appearance, because Admiral Duncan is one of my favourite admirals of all time. In fact, I would argue at some points that Camperdown was a far harder naval battle to fight than Trafalgar. But that's going to get me into trouble. There's going to be lots that's going to get me into trouble today. Festudines. Good choice. This comes from a lovely bakery which deliver. There's some very nice food going on here today. Right. Is Henderson in the mix? Let me just check. Let's see, where have I done Henderson? Nope. Henderson's not in the mix. I've left him out for a reason, because I thought, frankly, if I put him in, I'm going to sound too much like a broken record, but also because he is very, very cool. Hello, Blue Shirt Buddha. Thank you on the, well, yes, thank you on the 2,000 subscribers. That's all thanks to all of you. Of course, I was going to say something today. Thank you to everyone for doing it. It's one of the reasons I put so much effort into today, and one of the reasons why also Henderson hasn't been in here, because I thought if I put Henderson in here, it'll all become about Henderson. And thank you, Blue Shirt Buddha, for the donation. It's all been enabled since they started the monetization thing, and frankly, at some point when the lockdown is over, I'm going to take Drac out for a drink, and we're going to sit down in a pub somewhere over where they serve iron brew. I do know a pub in Surrey which serves iron brew, and he and I are going to discuss about how he makes all these things work, because it's far beyond me. Camporus. Yes, it's actually on my list of books to review. I get books sent to review, and do you think the book Japanese Destroyer Captain by Tamashiro Hari is worth reading? Yes. But I haven't read it yet, so I can't be 100% sure. But it's on my books to review. Say one, no Henderson. Where is the real Donovan? The reason he's not in here is I'm going to do a special about Henderson, so I thought, frankly, that would be a little bit too much. So, today's one is Command is Command, right? And this will be coming up on Twitter. I think Draken Fennell has just yayed the idea of me taking him to a pub in Surrey which serves ice-cold iron brew. I'm fairly sure that's why he's yaying. And the slides will go up now, I think, hopefully. Hopefully, he says. Always it's hopeful. Right then, Now, as you can see, the list of admirals which I've attempted to do is quite extensive. And I've divided it into 3 sections. And Testudines, before we start, what is iron brew? Iron brew is a drink which is from the Scottish version of Coca-Cola, which there is no equivalent for in taste. It's like Coca-Cola, doesn't really taste like anything else. Iron brew doesn't. But this is bright orange, and will probably turn you bright orange. Now, the first admiral we have got today is the Earl St. Vincent. Jervis himself. One of my favourite admirals from history. And he's a very cool guy. He lives 1734 to 1823, and he serves 1749 to 1807. So he does a long time in service. We're talking 58 years before 58 years around the mast. And actually, I've put down his strengths is stubborn, politically connected, decisive, an experienced sailor, an able administrator, and a reformer who like to promote based on ability rather than connections. Beatty we'll be getting to, but he's known for Battle of Cape St. Vincent and attempting to reform the Royal Dockyards. But if I was going to put St. Vincent in any role in World War II, he's got to be the first Sea Lord. Come on! This guy having an argument with Churchill. That would be something to watch. You know, Admiral Jervis and Winston Churchill having an argument over the direction of the war and what the Royal Navy is going to do. I would pay good money to see that argument. He's a complete and utter nutter, but that balances out Churchill because he's also a complete and utter nutter. And the next one. I'm afraid Beatty, if we send him back in the past, I'm making him a frigate commander because that's about all I could do. Honestly, when you look at Admiral Beatty, he serves 1884 to 1927. He lives till 1936, and he's actually very sick when he dies. He tries to make himself in many ways. He's known for leading gunboats, for battle cruisers, and all at Helgeland, Bight, and Doggerbank and Jutland. But honestly, when he looks and when he's navalish, he's not that good a sailor. He's not good at communicating. But he has an advantage that he's very connected to, thanks to his wife. So that helps him get promoted. But I think actually, as a frigate commander, he is dashing, so he'd probably pull it off. But no. St. Vincent for First Sea Lord in World War II. That is the history rewrite I want to see. I would love to do a what if television program documentary where I could actually put him up against Churchill somehow. That would just be so cool. No, I'm being nice to Beatty because he was lucky. Okay? There are many admirals who, if they'd made the same mistakes as he'd had while the run south and the run north at Jutland, would have lost their entire force. So he's lucky. So I've given him a frigate. We owe the county class cruisers. I'm just going to ask a question. Night Heron production, for all the shortcomings, don't we owe the county class cruisers to Beatty? No, Tyrwhitt was the guy who made the case for them. Mainly because he took something out to the China station as his flagship, really didn't like it, came back and made a lot of fuss, and they built something, they decided they were going to make the counties better. So, next one. My favourite. Admiral Duncan. And I've put here, he's honestly one of the few officers in the past who I'd actually be happy to serve under. And I would have happily served under him. He's very, very cool. He is also massive in height. And you've probably noticed that I've been joined by two buddies. This is because I want to demonstrate something to you. So, this is the side of the ship. This squirrel, called Nuts, is Admiral Duncan. And poor Blackie here, real name Gigi apparently, but I call her Blackie, is the sailor. So, Admiral Duncan picks up a rebelling sailor, holds them over the side of the ship like that, and goes, "Are you going to mutiny against me?" For some reason, the sailors decided not to. Did bring them back in. Thank you. These little pals might be coming into this again because I realised very quickly on I needed some demonstrations. Duncan is known, of course, for the Battle of Camperdown. He is very, very cool in the Battle of Camperdown. I think everyone else can hear me, Testoonines. I'm hoping so. And he wasn't really a admiral who bothered about flash or glory, but he was very dedicated to service. So my betting is that if Duncan had come forward and he brought him into World War II, this is the guy who would have probably taken over from Max Horton and run the western approaches. Because if anyone could do it, it would be Duncan. Coming from the past. I don't want to do my trick to check the sound because that's good. Yeah. Admiral Duncan, if you haven't read about him, is really, really cool. Okay? Go and look him up. There is not enough information about him. And I will also add today, if you haven't got this book, Admirals by Andrew Lambert, you're missing out because it's a great book and explores many good admirals. And it's one of Andrew's actually less famous now works, but it has so many good officers in it, it's worth getting. Okay? And I have been using it, I have to admit, for this. But Duncan's cool. So, let me make sure the next set of slides are up. Duncan, I do agree with you. Duncan does have some dance moves. But he's 6'4". Think about that in his period. We're talking, he dies in 1804. And if he hadn't died in 1804, he might well have been out with Nelson because he was a big fan of Nelson, and Nelson was a big fan of his. And Nelson sends this extraordinary letter to Duncan's son, who's serving in the Navy, saying he's so sorry Duncan's gone. Because really, Nelson seems to consider Duncan his equal. And that's the kind of interesting thing. When you consider Duncan is very, very not known, and yet Nelson, who is this god of war, as far as Britain's concerned, considers him his equal. So, really do think he should be looked up more. I'm so glad HMS Duncan is named for him. There have been several ships named for him, and they are richly deserved. But what the fact that he is forgotten so much in history is quite sad, and that's also the historical drama I'd love to see. Now, we've done Beatty, so we have to do Jellicoe. Now, I'm going to be slightly annoying, and I am going to move the camera to here because I keep losing you all to my head. Sorry about that. I don't like moving the camera once it's started, but it's sometimes easier when my head keeps disappearing. So I do apologise for that. Shame Duncan wasn't at Trafalgar. He could have punched Nelson's sharpshooter out of the rigging before the probably. Duncan would have been pretty mean. And actually, the idea is that if Duncan had been there, if the Royal Navy had Duncan actually on the Channel Squadron or something like that, he probably would have gone south. He wouldn't have been hanging around, and Nelson might well have had his third, his third sort of attack line being led by Duncan. Kevin Metallic, what is the third Admiral of the Sea, i.e. who is Henderson? I'll explain that another time. Today, now, it's Admiral Jellicoe. Now, Jellicoe is actually a really cool guy. He lives till 1935. He is very, very critical. Thank you, Sam Shikar. Yeah, third column. Sorry. He is analytical, decisive, pragmatic, has great perspective, is not the most personable person of things. Sforce famous for Jutland, but I think if he went back in time, I think this is the guy who I would put in charge of Quiberon Bay or facing the Armada. Because he's got similar personality traits to Hawke, to Howard of Effingham, and I think he could do those jobs. He could deal with that pressure. And it takes something to deal with the level of pressure which you're going to be dealing with. When the entire nation state, your entire nation, is riding on your performance in a battle, it takes some skill. So, Jellicoe is a good admiral. A very good one. Now, yeah. Just let me see the questions. They're all out of their time, unfortunately. Now, this one, of course, there was much debate over which Cochrane I should have in this, but there's only really one choice, and that is Thomas, who is an egotistical, paranoid, so many things wrong with this poor boy. Stephen White. Jellicoe was the rock the Royal Navy didn't need in World War I. That he was. Whereas Thomas Cochrane has so much potential. He's independently minded. He's got a strong spirit. He's innovative. He inspires myth. He's very organised, meticulous in command. All these things, he's great. He commands attacks on Martello towers. He does so many skillful things. He goes and sets up and leads the Chilean Navy, then does much the same for the Brazilian Navy. But he's so down paranoid. He hates having people in charge of him. In fact, probably the only role which would really suit Cochrane is I put that he's either got to be in combined operations somewhere, hopefully not in charge, or on a cruiser in the South Atlantic. I wouldn't put him in charge. I wouldn't put him in charge of destroyers. Nick Stanley, Cochrane as Captain Destroyer, no. To command destroyers, you need to be able to both lead up and lead down. You've got a flotilla which looks to you. When you're a Captain D, you're in charge of 8 ships, and you've got to look after them. But you've also got to work with the admirals, because your destroyers so often will be escorting the big ships. And Cochrane couldn't do that. Cochrane really wasn't good at that. So I would stick Cochrane pretty much, he's a lone. He could maybe do Harwood's role in the South Atlantic. Maybe. But even Harwood's having to work with senior officers. And I wouldn't put him in charge of a submarine because, as Tess Dudang suggested, because he gets so paranoid, he'd think they were trying to take over the ship at some point. He's got a lot of potential, but it's wasted. Salam Mashanga, how about commandos? Well, I did say probably combined operations. He could potentially do combined operations, but that's the thing. And most importantly, I will add, Banham had to eat fast to not miss too much. Well, that's good, because I'm actually eating while here, so that's probably more polite than me. Speaking of that, quickly. It's my lunch. So, the next modern admiral. Hello, Jeff. Somerville. Now, Somerville. Okay. I would suggest that Somerville is possibly achieves one of the greatest feats known to mankind. He makes friends with Admiral Ernest King. Think about that. He makes friends with the CNO of the USN who hates the British to such an extent that there is a folklore myth that Ernest King actually comes to Somerville's funeral. I haven't been able to check this out. I've only found it on one website. But so I'm not sure if it's true at all. And I'm sent an email to an American naval historian I know to ask him if that's true. He hasn't got back to me. But they made really, really good friends. What I do know is that there were letters going back between the two for most of their lives after they served together during World War II. So, Ernest King is made a friend with him. He's got a natural, dutiful, diplomatic. He's able. He is a very good commander. But by 1943, he's tired and he's unlucky. And frankly, when he's sent to Washington, that's for the British Naval Delegation, that's an excellent posting for him. I've suggested if he goes into the past, Somerville could well be a very good successor to Collingwood, or take over from Collingwood, as Nelson's successor in the Mediterranean. But, again, that requires you to be lucky. Salam Shikaya, 93. Now that really is something that no other British admiral achieved. Actually, Percy Noble also managed to achieve it. So, Basically, there were two admirals out there. One who got King's grudging respect and one who became his friend. Definitely. Definitely. Now. Oh, good Lord. John Hart. Maybe Somerville pretended to be French. I'm not sure, but he certainly did make friends with him. And that was one of the crucial things. You know, he made friends with him and it worked very, very well. So, quickly. The next four. So, slide notes 3 should be just live on Twitter. Now, that's at AC_Naval History. So, if you want to go see the slides up close, because I'm not holding them up for long enough. A, I apologise. I will try and hold them up for longer. And B, the next set should be live now. So that's at AC_Naval History. And as always, I do add this in because I need to say a big thank you to all my patrons and all the people who have done the super chats and those things, because the money is going to go towards research. That's what I use it for. So it all gets into the research account and it's really starting to help. It's managed to pay for the ordering of 2 new books. Thank you. Right. So. Right. Did I just see that something? Yeah. Right then. King died 7 years before Somerville. And that was the interesting thing with me. I thought he did as well, but I wasn't quite sure. Somerville doesn't live that long, so that's why I wasn't quite sure. But, you know, it seemed one of those nice stories, if true. It might have been the other way round, is what I think it might have been, if that is the case. But, as I said, I'm not Ernest King's, I'm not really a history of American. Now, well, I am I'm through quite a lot of American history, but I have to say, some of your admirals I have lost track of in my time, because I prefer your ships. So, Sir Sidney Smith. Next one. Right then. Sidney Smith is the guy who's famous because Somerville died in 1949, King died in 1956. So, yes, King did outlive Somerville by 7 years. Thank you, David. I thought it was that way around, but if, you know. Right, so. Sidney Smith. Frankly, he's a bit of a But he's if you know what I mean. He is brave, unafraid to take risks, strategically astute, and able to discern which orders could be ignored for the war. He is also, and look at this man and tell me if you don't see it, he is completely and utterly annoyed that he lives in the same time as Nelson, as Collingwood, as these two great admirals. Because he likes them, he knows they're nice people, but because of them, he knows he can't get at senior. He knows he's not going to rise as quickly as them because they are so great. He's very good, but they are just that bit better. But he is incredibly aggressive. He commands a light squadron for the Swedish Navy and was principal advisor to King Gustav III during the Russo-Swedish War. And actually, and this is something which has always amazed me, at one point, the Swedish king requests that he be slightly less aggressive in his handling of his ships. Yes, a Viking king tells a Royal Navy officer he's a bit too aggressive. Could he tone it down a bit? Yeah. Oh. And, of course, he does transport Napoleon back to France after Egypt. And during the siege of Acre, he's the guy who defeated Napoleon, because he made sure the Ottomans had all the strength they needed to resist the French. And when I say had all the strength they needed to resist the French, a couple of times, as well as him using his ships to provide fire support, there is a strong suspicion that the naval party, which was involved in driving off the Ottoman attack, not the French attack on the Ottoman walls at one point, which is technically led by a Lieutenant Smith of his ship, who doesn't exist in the records. So we're fairly sure it was actually Captain Smith who put on a lieutenant's jacket, just so he wouldn't be spotted. So, okay, what would I give Sidney Smith? Well, he's got to take the destroyers and light forces for Operation Torch. He has got to be the Rear Admiral destroyers. There is no one like him for light forces, and frankly, he's single-minded, he's daring. The only reason I don't give him tribal-class destroyers is honestly because he deserves a bigger command than just being a flotilla commander. He deserves to be a Rear Admiral destroyers. He would hate to be the higher command. He might want it, but he would absolutely hate it. Because he'd have to deal with paperwork and he'd have to deal with other people. But he's a good warrior. He would love a light force. Give him someone like Cunningham or someone over the top to deal with the politicians and let him go fight. And this is Philip Vian in so many ways. I do know who I'm describing here. This guy is... Sidney Smith is cool. If you sent Sidney Smith into Narvik in charge of the destroyers and HMS Warspite, the Germans wouldn't have only had to ram their ships ashore. They'd have still been running because he'd have probably liberated Norway. Because honestly, if anyone could lead a counter-invasion and successfully liberate an entire country with only 9 or so destroyers and a battleship, it would probably be Sidney Smith. He is one of a kind. And actually, this is one of the things which I love when I'm looking back in Admirals and I'm talking about them, and I do this with the students. I always explain that the Admirals they're characters. They build upon each other, and there's a competition with each other, but also friendliness. And in the 1800s, in Napoleon Wars, the Royal Navy has a glut of very good officers. Trust me, they also have some absolutely terrible, atrocious men who should never have been put in charge of a ship, ever, in their entire history. But they also have a glut of absolutely fantastic naval officers. Testudines, but tribals would give him more freedom to disobey orders, not worry about protecting capital ships. True, but as Rear Admiral destroyers, he'd get light cruisers and destroyers to muck around with, and he would probably still ignore whatever the capital ships were telling him to do. So, you might as well let him go with it. Okay? Cumberland Sausage, are you going to do James Samaras? Not today. I think I might be having to do more of these. Jemek, Warspite under Smith would carve Narvik Fjord into the Swedish border. I just have a feeling he would find liberal application of high explosive to be his main methodology. Okay. Then we have Harwood. Okay? Harwood is a cool dude. And there's been some very good books about him done. Tellingly, I cannot find a single one of them at the moment. I had 4 of them out the other day, and I cannot find a single one at the moment. typical in my book. This is what happens when you have so many books. I love them all. They're very important to me. But sometimes whenever I'm hunting a book, I don't find it. So sometimes I stick book out. When I spot a book, I go, stick it on this desk so I have it when I need it. Now, if I was going to give Harwood a command in the Napoleonic Wars, I'd actually switch him with Pellew. I'd give him the Indian Ocean. I'd let him go out there and I'd let him do what he needed to do. He'd be brilliant as an independent commander with no army to deal with, no politicians to deal with. Harwood would be in heaven because his weakness is his ability to deal with politics and inter-service rivalry. This is a very good commanding officer, an excellent admiral, but he's a very honourable man and doesn't understand how people could say one thing to his face and another thing to their higher-ups. He just doesn't understand it. Now, quickly, Jeff Beeler, Smith the Master Diplomat too. Yes, he was an amazing diplomat, but he was also nearly bankrupted by doing diplomacy for the British government. So that's why I sort of ignored that one because, you know, it took it a while for the British government to actually pay the bill. So, Harwood, if he goes back in time, it's the Indian Ocean for him. And he'd have done it well. He'd have enjoyed it. Far away from politicians. Almost dropped my brownie. That would have been preferable. Testidines makes him liaison with King in the US. No. Smith deserves better than that. It's like Harwood deserves better than what he gets. Now, actually though, talking about who I would have given the role of organising King in Washington too. May I introduce you to one of the most forgotten admirals in Royal Navy history and one of the best. And we should remember him more because, frankly, one of our favourite pastimes are built by a company which is named by him, named for him, I think. Geoffrey Hornby. Geoffrey Hornby. Now, he is a king. He was a great student of professional history. He had a wonderfully clear head and a scientific mind. He was a natural diplomatist, an unrivaled tactician, and to a singular independence and uprightness of character, he had a mastery of technical detail and familiarity with contemporary thought and progress that were unusual in those days among officers of his standing. To quote, this is basically Andrew Lambert being very nice. Andrew Lambert's picked up a quote by another historian, but it's nicer than Andrew Lambert writing that, frankly, most of the admirals in Geoffrey Hornby's age were just not that good at the technical engineering stuff and went with what they were told by the nearest engineer. Hornby actually did know it, and Hornby was in many ways a forerunner of Henderson in that he knew everything about his fleet. He knew it all. And if anyone tried to cause trouble, ooh. Steve White. Question is, would anyone do any good with Prince of Wales and Repulse in Singapore, or is it just Admiral Phipps' hopeless task? Maybe someone's powerful enough to buck Churchill. I will be getting to that at some point. There is actually an admiral on my list who I might have given that role to. Tis Francis' fault. Not this session. I'm not going to talk about Tryon, but are you going to talk about Tryon? Imagine him at Jutland. Not going to this session, but I might do this again. If you really enjoy this sort of session of going through these admirals, I will do it again. Basically, that's one of my policies with this channel, is if people really like things, I will go back and revisit them and try and do similar things, because I enjoy sharing history, and I enjoy you all being happy with history. Steppy42, have I mentioned Fisher yet? No, I haven't. Fisher's not really being mentioned in this one. He's going to be in another one. So, Geoffrey Hornby, his weakness is he had big, due to political due to politics, he had to sit out the Crimean War. But have any of you heard of the Pig War? Right then, so the Pig War is this really quite cool bit of experience, because when Britain and America agree treaties which set up Canada and all sorts of things, there's a dispute over some of the islands around Vancouver. In fact, San Juan Island mainly. And there are British farmers and American farmers and everyone else on there. And a pig, which is owned by a British guy, goes into an American's field and gets killed by the American. And so the British send a naval brigade and the Americans send troops. It ends up going to international arbitration with the Kaiser arbitrating it, and it gets decided so to pay to Americans. But for a year, there are forces from both nations sitting on this island looking at each other. The naval brigade is commanded by Geoffrey Hornby. And he's just cool. He basically spends his entire time going, no, we're not fighting a war. No, we're not fighting a war. This is in 1858/9. And it's just a beautiful thing, because you have the Canadian governor pushing for a fight. You have people in Britain pushing for a fight. You have people in America pushing for a fight. And the local American and British commanders going, really? At one point, the Americans decide they're going to build a battery. And Hornby actually sends them a note saying, excuse me, I know you're planning on building a battery there, but you might not have noticed that my frigates are all parked next to it. So you're going to have 6 guns, none of which can actually point and all of which are at the same level or below our frigates. So if there's a fight, we'd wipe you out. To which the American commander turned round to the engineering officer who was in charge of it and went, you freaking idiot! In very polite ways, and then invited Hornby over for dinner to say thank you for pointing it out. That was how worried Hornby was about a war. Hornby's plan, if there'd been a fight, was to, quite simply, and by the way, the cans, I will say thank you to the person watching. My lovely girlfriend, she is watching. Thank you for these. She's keeping me in Iron Brew, she's decided, I think. So, pretty much, Hornby is amazing. Hornby is one of those admirals who you wish to be around. He's a master at diplomacy, at keeping his own government worried, at keeping everyone organised. So, if I was going to send anyone to manage Ernest King, it would have to be Hornby. Principally because if I sent Hornby out to manage Ernest King would probably have, so by the end of it, have been singing Kumbaya, my lord, and I love the British. Or the, I don't know, God Save the Queen. He would have had a wonderful time. Yes, and basically the entire War of the Pig was, you know, it's marked by diplomacy. Band Home, we've got to get that sponsorship from Iron Brew. That would be nice. But actually, I have to say the Patreon money and the what's it called? The Super Chat money, which you all have, which has just started and you were all very kind with, is far more sponsorship than I ever thought I'd get, and it's been very, very well received. As I said, it's going towards funding the research. Now, Hornby is a superstar, but he is very much forgotten. Rather like the next Admiral. Harold Burrough. How many of you have heard of him? Actually, no, I asked the wrong question. I'm asking the wrong group of people, because you're all well informed, you're good, you're interested in naval history. If anyone has heard of him, you will have. But this guy commanded the 10th Cruiser Squadron, 1940 to 1942, leading in several successful raids. Commanded the escort in Operation Pedestal. The Allied naval forces attacking Algiers during Operation Torch. Succeeded Ramsay as Allied Naval Commander-in-Chief Expeditionary Force. Eventually became the naval commander of occupied post-war Germany. And no one's heard of him. He is just this quiet, calm professional. He is a safe pair of hands in World War II, and he is one of the most forgotten admirals of all. Since I started doing this project, okay, I've been taking a lot of interest in any debates on Twitter about admirals, any debates I see in chat rooms about admirals, and who should be commanding what, and who should be here and who should be there. But Burrough never comes up. He's this admiral who I know because of the amount of history he gets involved in, and he never comes up. He is this really excellent admiral. He's a very experienced, very professional, very hard-working. He's very good at administration. He's very good with his sailors, and he is completely forgotten. I'd have almost thought he was Admiral Henderson if I didn't realise that Henderson was completely written out of history, whereas Burrough is footnotes in history. It's always, oh, Burrough was here, Burrough was there, Burrough was leading this, and then blah, 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 blah. He leads the escort in Operation Pedestal. He is a guy without which Algiers attack, Operation Torch, would not have happened. The Commander-in-Chief Expeditionary Forces after Ramsay. These are not easy roles, and he does them with aplomb. So, this is one of the most forgotten senior commanders of World War II. Please look him up. And he is an excellent, excellent officer. He's also someone actually who the modern Navy could really look up to and really use as an inspirational officer, because he is a very calm professional. He's good at the politics. He's good at the administration. His only weakness is he's a bit quiet about it. And honestly, if we put him back in time, I would probably send him to command... I would give him the North Sea, and I would give him Camperdown. Because if anyone could take the place of Duncan in commanding that fleet and taking on the Dutch and doing what he did, it's got to be Burrough. Burrough is this quiet, calm professional. And he dies, he serves 1889 to 1977, and, he lives 1889 to 1977, and serves 1903 to 1949. So he actually lives till 1977, but is completely forgotten. You know, he's around 28 years after he's finished service. He's not used. I look for speeches. I look for talks. I look for him being invited to places. He is not. He is forgotten, and that is wrong. But as I said, if anyone was going back in time for Camperdown, I'd be sending Burrough, because no one could do it quite like he could. Undaunted Fudd. It is always hard to promote as a quiet professional, let alone make it into the history books. That is true. You know, I noticed that as well, because there are some really good historians out there who I try and signpost and I try and point people in the direction of. But I do know I have a slight advantage because I have the nickname going around the Brian Blessed of naval history, which means at talks, when I go to conferences and I put papers into conferences, really quite a lot of conference committees know what they're getting. And I do know where they put me in the conferences, and I know where they talk about me because it's useful, because I am known as quite an active, engaging speaker. So usually I get an afternoon slot where you want to wake the people up before they get the keynote. And I know exactly where I'm going to be put in. It happens every single time. And I don't mind. It's useful. It gets me into the conferences. But I do look at some of my other colleagues and go, well, they'd be quite good as well. 'Tis Francis' fault. He just got on with the job, I guess. Yes. That would be Harold Burroughs' motto. I just got on with the job. San Mashiach, including dealing with mutinies. Yes. Burrough dealt with mutiny. Interesting enough, he's one of the few officers who comes through the various mutinies which happened in the 1930s, some of the mutinies which happened in the war period, in the Gordon, etc., without a blemish on his character. Blue Shirt Buddha, in your opinion, was Burrough the British equivalent of Raymond Spruance in the US Navy history? Yes, but Spruance has got a class of destroyer named after him and gets a lot more said about him. Honestly, Spruance gets a ton more press. So, yes, to an extent equivalent, but Burrough is being completely put to one side, and Spruance is actually managed to get some press. Oh. So, that is set one, the first set. And as I said, there are 3 sets, of which 2 sets have printed out, and 1 set hasn't properly printed out. I've only got printed out 2 of them. The others haven't printed out. So, I've got 22 out of 30 ready to go. Dave Burnham, Spruance's current reputation surpasses Halsey's. Yes, it does. And Spruance has really had a big of a comeback recently. He's actually pretty cool. Yeah, I do agree. HMS Burrough would sound a bit strange. Hi, Ian. Thank you for joining us. I have to say, Halsey and Jack Ray, after hearing Drac about Halsey, I do not like Halsey at all. I would say Halsey, like many good admirals, has a personality which, frankly, you wouldn't want to be with. But it happens. So, the next set of admirals. And this is where I start getting really contentious. And I am getting contentious. Francis Drake. Now, when I started doing this, the amount of messages I got saying, oh, Francis Drake would be brilliant, bring him forward to World War II, do this, do that. And Alex Hunt has already put up there a nice segue into this, which is, if you're going to disobey orders, at least be right about it. Well, Francis Drake is an excellent technical sailor and a very good and inspirational quip with a large amount of aggression. But he's more of a privateer than a naval officer. He turns off his lamp, and he's really not that good at logistics. And he's Cadiz and all these things. So I was actually sitting there going, well, he's known for singeing the King of Spain's beard. Under the command of Lord Howard of Effingham, he does okay. He does okay in the Armada and circumnavigating world. So honestly, what I've decided is that Drake, if he's going to be doing anything, make him a submarine officer. Honestly, he's got the technical proficiency that if he was put in charge of something, he would take to the technicals of it. It's a small crew, which is something he can manage quite well, unlike certain other officers we've already been over. Cochrane. And he is naturally more of a lone wolf with aggression. So let him have a submarine. He could go off hunting. He would love hunting in a submarine in the Mediterranean or the North Sea or the Pacific. If you set him off with a T-class in the Pacific, Drake would be a happy man and would be a square peg in a square hole every single day of the week. He'd be very, very happy. Right then. At Dr. Alexander Clark, from turning 3434, what was Nelson's gripe? That he tries to drag you around beating up polar bears? Gets to acquainted with your wife or worse? I will get to Nelson. He has many good things, but I will get to him. Alex Hunt wouldn't be any good at recon though, given that was the main role of British submarines. Yes, but actually, Francis Drake was actually quite good at reconnaissance. That is one of the things he did do quite well. Go and get information. And if he was being paid for it, there is a chance for it. This Transvaal, the subs are where the modern pirate attitude lives. Yes, they do even fly the Jolly Roger. Well, traditionally, I'm not sure they're still allowed to now. They might just stick up a broom. When they come home from completing a successful mission. Selim Sikshaya, 93. If it was during the Napoleonic Wars, an equal to Cochrane? Yes. Well, actually, no. He would have done better than Cochrane because, honestly, in the Napoleonic Wars, Francis Drake was never as paranoid as Cochrane. So he would be... He'd have done better than Cochrane. He would have certainly done better than Cochrane. There again, it isn't hard to have done better than Cochrane because Cochrane was quite so... Oh, God. Paranoid and insane. Basically... Cochrane is... Let's put it this way. Let's bring in the stuffed animals again for this one. So, Nuts here is now your regular crew. He's just going around his business doing the stuff. Blackie is Cochrane. Cochrane would spend their entire time watching this person going about doing their normal business and get it into his head that they are planning on rebelling against them because of the way they eat their food with a fork. Okay? That is Cochrane. He is, when he is bored and not actually fighting a war, he is bonkers. In the nicest way. I have to admit, at one point when I was writing about Francis Drake, and before I actually sat on the idea of thinking, actually, he would be a good submarine commander, Sheppy 42, I agreed with you. As you said Drake would be pretty useful in a raider submarine or a surface raider. I was thinking, actually, he'd almost be more useful to the Germans, to the Kriegsmarine, than the Royal Navy. But the trouble is, he definitely wouldn't agree with the Kriegsmarine's politics, or the Nazi, certainly not the Nazi government's politics. And although I have to say, I do agree with Drake, Draken for now, I mean, that the senior officers of the German Navy were probably the least of the services in terms of their sort of level of in-touchness with the party, but they were still pretty in touch in many respects, and I don't think Drake would have liked that at all. Night Heron production. Just quickly on subs, since you touched on it. The amphibian class, aka HMS Alliance, were they Canis fleet subs? When they were built, possibly. By the time it gets later, no. Pretty much they're a starting point. Bishon. Admiral Halsey shockingly got on well with MacArthur, much to the pleasure of displeasure, I think, of Nimitz. Halsey did well during the first part of the Pacific War, leading the effort in the South Pacific. Yes, he did. That definitely happened. Perry Rhodes. Francis Drac it is now. That would be cool. If he does do that now, I will take, great pleasure in that. Jack Ray. Sometimes it seems more difficult to determine if an admiral is aggressive for his own glory or for the furthering of military goals. I know in some degrees it's a mixture of both. It often is a mixture of both. But in this era, they're privateers. And yes, this, David Burnham. Where was that great picture of Vian taken? Because Vian is the next one. That is taken on HMS Cossack. And that's from my book. This picture is straight out of the step for my book, by the way. Which, I think you've been ordering all, thankfully, quite a large number of from Amazon. So thank you for when it comes out, because the publishers come around to me and gone, can you please hurry up with the edits? Because we'd really like it to get it printed soon. And I went, I thought I had a little bit longer. We'd like it as soon as possible. So thank you for all that. But that does mean I may or may not do I probably will do a live discussion if I do anything on Sunday rather than a prepared presentation, because I will be spending so much time on the weekend writing and making sure I have the book polished. Now, Philip Vian. As you all know, he is one of my favourites. He is absolutely excellent as an admiral. He is aggressive. He's independent, and most importantly, he is lucky. Vian is lucky. Blue Shirt Buddha, what's the title? It's Tribals, Battles, and Daring. Tribal Battle and Daring Classes, the Genesis of the Modern Destroyer. It's on Amazon. I've not set up a website or anything special for that. I'm really not good. As you can tell, this is about the limits of my technical ability, and I am still getting used to the super chat function and the other functions which are going on. There are so many other cool things going on at the moment. I have to say, I'm going to say thank you again. Thank you to all the patrons, and thank you to the super chats, because, as I said, that is funding the research. You're all cool. Now, Philip Vian is a superstar. He really is. He's known, of course, for the Altmark incident, for charging across the Atlantic and hunting the Bismarck, for the First Battle of Sirte, for commanding carriers at Salerno. And post-war, by the way, for those people who like to say Vian didn't like aircraft carriers, didn't understand naval aviation, well, the Royal Navy would have been in a bit of a problem if he wasn't keen on them and wasn't good at them, because post-war, he serves as the 5th Sea Lord in charge of naval aviation. He does well. He does really, really quite well. Schleppy42. Didn't Napoleon say he'd rather have a good enough general who is lucky than an unlucky genius general or something? Pretty much. Pretty much luck matters in war. And to an extent, we make our own luck. Okay? With Somerville, and I will be getting into this later. I think I've already done Somerville, haven't I? Yes, I've already done Somerville. Somerville stops making his own luck because he stops taking chances. And sometimes being lucky is just being willing to take a chance and take the hit. So that's sometimes the difference between being lucky. You go, oh, that person's lucky, but if they hadn't taken the chance, they never got that chance. They'd never been lucky. And that is the thing. Vian is always prepared to take the chance. No matter how tired, no matter how stressed he is, no matter how hard he's worked and how ill he might be becoming, he always takes the chance. He always pushes them. And one of the really interesting things, when I talk to someone like Michael Clapp, who was, of course, the Commodore of 1982 Amphibious Task Group, but was a senior naval observer and all sorts of things. During the sort of hello, I flashed here back end error. Hello. So when I talk to Michael Clapp, who was the Amphibious Task Group Commander in the 1982 Falklands War, who was so many things before that. He was a naval observer in naval aviation, all these things. He will tell you that quite a lot of the Fleet Air Arm feel like they are an elite. They feel, the Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Navy in the 1960s, 1970s feel like they are an elite. And the reason they feel like they're an elite is because in 1948, between sort of after World War II, when Philip Vian is 5th Sea Lord, he sets about encapsulating the Fleet Air Arm with the same spirit they'd had in the tribal class destroyers. They had to feel like they were an elite, that they were special, that they were something critical to the Navy, and without them, a war wouldn't work. And he did it. Now, so, our modern Fleet Air Arm, he might not be the easiest commander sometimes to work with, but it was very good. Now, there's a nice discussion going on about Admiral Byng, so I will quickly pop into that. Byng didn't deserve being shot. Well, unfortunately for Byng, he had the problem he had no reason for leaving. It was felt he withdrawn in the face of a weaker enemy rather than a superior one. He couldn't make any sort of legitimate defense. And the trouble is, he didn't really try to. He thought his connections would protect him. And it was at a time when the Royal Navy needed to make an example of someone. So, Byng got shot. And thank you to whoever just subscribed. It flashed up, but I couldn't see it because Ian Greenland's actual chat is coming in front of it. So Ian, thank you. And thank you to whoever subscribed. Subscriptions really make me happy. The Royal Navy needs it. The Royal Navy needs to encourage aggression because they have to dominate a world. And that's the thing. Shams Tekna, did Vian blame a certain cat for Cossack sinking due to bad luck? No, he didn't. Actually, he blamed Cossack sinking on himself. He said right then, I had to pick which way to go. The bombs were coming down vertical. He could go one way, a port or starboard. He made the choice. Okay? That was it. And unfortunately, he went the wrong way. And it's a 50-50 chance. And he sits there and goes, yeah, but other times, the previous time I'd gone the other direction and I'd been okay. And the previous time before that, I'd gone that way and I'd been fine. So, he's doing it. He's thinking about it. Turning 343. 2,000, hit 4,000 by next week. You never know. If there are enough subscribers. And it's going to sound funny, but I quite enjoy having the subscribers because it says I'm doing something right. And that's good as far as I'm concerned, because, as I said when I started this is me, because I can't be in the university teaching and doing all the stuff I'm not doing, I thought, well, I might as well do teach some stuff online and see if people enjoy naval history. And so that's why I get a kick out of it. So the more subscribers, the more everything, that's good. And any money raised, as I said, goes towards research. Ian Greenley, although shooting Byng was not nice, it certainly worked. Was the RN ever reticent in the face of enemy ever again? Occasionally they were, and let's be honest, Somerville probably could have been. But no, Philip Vian is good. Now, if I was putting him back in time, leaving aside Nelson, I've put, he is Rodney reincarnated. The Battle of Sens would have been right up his street. The Battle of Martinique, action of Cape Finisterre, all these things. But it's the 1780 Battle of Cape St. Vincent. And the reason I talk about that is because Vian actually talks about that battle when he's training his destroyer crews. in one of his flotilla briefings, and I have this lovely quote, which actually hasn't gone in the book because the only one person could remember it. And so, as they're a bit of a historian, I'm wondering if they've made it up. But it's still a very cool quote. He actually brings up the Battle of Cape St. Vincent. And he says, we will engage in a running fight like the Battle of St. Vincent, Cape St. Vincent, and there we will win. And you think, that's what Narvik was. That's what so many battles for the tribal destroyers were. And this guy brings it up. So, if he's going back in time, Vian is going to the Battle of Cape St. Vincent. He's going to take Rodney's place. And he's going to have a lovely time. Yeah, he did all those. So, Stephen White. Yeah. Stephen White. Sorry, he got shot. Remember that was a trial, I guess. Wow. So, Battle of Cornell was caused by that. The Battle of Cornell wasn't caused. There was other officers as well who'd been kicked out of the service before then. So, lots of things. But also, the Battle of Cornell is caused by the Royal Navy going, and especially the commander at the time, really knowing that the first rule when you're dealing with surface raiders is you engage. Because any damage you cause slows them down. And remember, after the Battle of Cornell, the Germans as Space Fleet gets slowed down. They have to start repairing. They have to replenish. They've lost ammunition. They've lost all sorts of things they've used. So they actually are easier to kill at the Falklands because of the Cornell. So this is the Royal Navy, and it's the same policy which the Romans used when they were dealing with uprisings. You charge at the uprising with whatever you've got, because even if you lose, you slow them down, you stall them, you make them, keep them busy for a bigger force to get in. It's a classic way of economic warfare and sea protection. Now, Testudanes, I prefer your lectures to the ones I should be watching. I shouldn't enjoy that, but I do. As a lecturer, I should be advising you to watch your lectures. But thank you. That does my ego a lot of good. Cumberland Sausage. Could it be said shooting Bing worked too well? Not really. No. Richard Hughes. When's the next video on Anglo-Japanese relations? That's being worked on. That's going to come up some point, hopefully the weekend. Rackstraw, Brian Blessed of History. Henderson's alive! Sorry, that's probably woken up my dog downstairs. So, who do we go to after Vian? Who do we go to after Vian? Right then, just answer question. Jack Ray, are the UK destroyer admirals and captains of World War II the most aggressive in English, British and UK history? Pretty much. They are selected for their aggression. Controlled aggression, but aggression. And they are incredibly aggressive when they have to be. They destroy captains, flotilla leaders. Honestly, that's one of the things you realise is one of the differences between the Royal Navy submarine operations and the American submarine operations is the Americans have been very, very actively dividing their aggressive officers between their submarines and their destroyers. And the Royal Navy have been the aggressive, really aggressive ones who are going to destroyers. Turning 343. Next week, fully fixed stream slide setup. We can always hope. We can always hope. We can hope. We can hope. We're working on it. But now, Sir William Parker. Sir William Parker. Actually, the thing interesting with the slide setup is it works when I'm doing a live, but when I'm doing a pre-scheduled event, it doesn't like it. I'm still working out why Streamlabs isn't working with those. I'll figure it out. So, Sir William Parker. Now, he's one of the most forgotten admirals again. He's one of those ones who is completely forgotten. And he shouldn't be. He's just very, very cool. And he is the calm professional master fleet coordinator of the British. And basically, if I was going to send Parker anywhere, and if you haven't looked him up, he's not famous at all because he never gets to get a direct to battle. He never gets direct to battle, but he's one of the critical admirals of the 1800s, especially because he serves till 1857. And he starts serving in 1793, so he's in many ways a relic of the Nelsonian Navy. He is serving as the Royal Navy transitions, and he is the master of fleet diplomacy, of naval deterrence, and all these things. And he's a safe pair of hands. So, in my book, this calm professional, he would have been the British Pacific Fleet, and before that, the China Station in 1939-42. I.e., if anyone... Thank you, Foreman, for signing up, for subscribing. If anyone could have done better than Phillips and have deterred Japanese aggression and stopped the Japanese attacking Britain, it's this guy. Because he manages to stop Russians. He manages to stop the French. At one point, he has the whole of China dancing to his tune. He is a very, very interesting admiral, and he gets forgotten so easily. Now, while you're thinking about Parker, I'm going to quickly answer some of the questions. Ian Greenley, I think the biscuit for aggressive destroyer captains other than glowworms was the Polish destroyer that took on Bismarck at machine gun range. That destroyer was part of Philip Vian's group, and they all got onto machine gun range. So basically, it was just being an honorary tribal destroyer for the day. I consider no difference between the Polish destroyer and the tribal class destroyers on that day. They are one group. Perry Roden, Roberts charged at everything that had the unlucky condition of not being US Navy in origin. Yes, he did. But to get back to William Parker, this is the safe pair of hands. This is the guy who, as I said, if anyone could have, and because he would completely ignore politicians when they were annoying him, he would ignore diplomats when they were causing him trouble and just do the diplomacy himself. And he would break rules and make rules. He did a very, very good work. Now, let me just check the next slides have gone up. Slide notes 4 of 5 should be live. I say, should be live. Basically, what I try and do is I try and save them all so they're ready to go. Now, I'm going to do another of my favourite admirals. And he's one of my favourites because he's, again, one of the ones who gets overlooked so easily. Reginald Tyrwhitt. Now, he's famous, of course, for leading the Harwood force, which is the basis which Henderson uses. So if you're doing a drinking game, you can now have a shot. Which Henderson uses as the basis for arguing for the tribal class destroyers. And Tyrwhitt is the template and the reason why I say Parker could, if anyone could have curbed Japanese aggression. Because Tyrwhitt manages to curb Japanese aggression in the 1920s. He manages to pretty much in 1926-ish sit on there and go, nope, stop it. And they do. He's decisive, he's organised, he's good at leading and trusted by the sailors, which is very important after the Inver Gordon mutinies. He is incredibly important after the Inver Gordon mutinies. Yes, it was ORP Pirun with Bismarck, not ORP Blasenkia. And I just completely destroyed those pronunciations. I do apologise. They are to an extent modified tribals. They're based on a tribal hull, but it's the N class, if I remember correctly. And they have some similars, but they're good ships. So you have Reginald Tyrwhitt. Now, he, of course, leads the Harwich force. And why is he important? Because if anyone, he sets the standard for what Royal Navy destroyers in the interwar are built upon. He is the personification of aggression when the Royal Navy is building its destroyers, but then he matures into this strategic, grand strategy, senior naval officer. And technically, he serves for the Royal Navy. He serves in the British Armed Forces from 1883 till 1945, including at one point trying to join the Home Guard as a soldier, private, so he could still fight. This man. Let's just work this out. He was born in 1870. So by 1939, he was 69 years old. And he joined the Home Guard with the intention of fighting any invaders. Then people turn round to me and tell me that the Home Guard would have been swept aside by the Germans if they landed. I don't think so. I think if this is the caliber of man the Home Guard has in it, then they are going to get murdered by grandpas. To quote Reginald Tyrwhitt, I joined the Home Guard because if anyone landed in my area, my grandchildren were going to get away. If you're taking on a man like this, who's very much sure that his grandchildren are going to get away to safety, the people he loves are going to get away to safety, then he ain't going down. You're going to have to kill him to get past them. So, this is the basis of aggression, which the Royal Navy found its destroyer force on in the 1920s and 1930s, after World War I, because of what he did with the Harwich force. And he is a master of the inshore, master of the raids. So, if he's going back in time, he's commanding my inshore squadrons in the Napoleonic Wars. There is no chance he's not in charge of them. Because, frankly, he's critical. He is just... He's one of those masters. He's one of those great naval officers. And he writes a really cool book. If you want to read it, Tyrwhitt's book is absolutely worth a read. It's one of the best books out there to read. To his Francis Rule, the mutiny at Invergordon could have really spiraled like communist uprising, if not handled right, kind of spiraling. Yes, and Tyrwhitt, because he's trusted by the men, goes in. And he ruins Durdas's career. He ruins several admirals' careers because he just goes, nope, they've made it wrong. They can't be given that. They've got to be going. I'm vetoing this. And he just stopped it. He was really about stopping what had been happening. The Invergordon mutiny, of course, for those who don't know, is started because there's an attempt to standardise pay across the fleet, and it's going to cause a lot of trouble. It's going to basically cut the pay of the World War One and pre-World War One people to the post-World War One people's starting rates, and that causes all sorts of trouble. So basically what happens is a compromise, the solution is reached, and it's Tyrwhitt negotiating. And by the way, like every Royal Navy mutiny over pay, it's always billed as being a sailor's revolt. It's actually a chief petty officer's revolt. They're the ones who are going to suffer most from the loss of pay. It's the senior NCOs. And it's when the senior NCOs revolt, you have problems. And Tyrwhitt basically goes in and he meets the sailors, who are technically the front of it, and then says, fine. And then he meets the chief petty officers. He finds out what they've been going on. He finds out that the mutiny has been caused in part by pay, but also by certain admirals and certain other officers not doing their jobs properly, not looking after men, as is expected of a Royal Navy officer. And Tyrwhitt basically writes them off and kicks them out. And one of the few officers who gets a good write-up from him, if I can find it after this, is Harold Burrough. He gets a good write-up from Tyrwhitt after the end of the Gordon Mutiny because he's been doing his job properly. Pretty much. And Ian Greenley, also the Home Guard had tens of thousands of concrete pillboxes to fight from. There's one in my friend's back garden turned into a potting shed. It overlooks at the beach. Yeah, they did. They had, you know, the Home Guard are made fun of because of the tongue-in-cheek humour of Dad's Army and what happened in it. But honestly, the Home Guard were not a force I would like to have messed with. Because I always remember a speech from West Wing when I'm talking about the Home Guard. Because then it's a guy's doing a filibuster. And the President Bartlett looks up and goes, why is he doing this? And it turns out the guy has a grandkid who's ill and the bill's not going to support him. And President Bartlett's point is, what you can do whatever you like to me, but you do not mess with my grandchildren, and that is what he's going on. Well, this is what men like Tyrwhitt felt. In the nicest way, their view was that if there was an invasion by the Germans, their grandchildren, their wives, their children, their daughters who were at home would have to get away. Their sons were off fighting. So the only ones who were going to hold the line was going to be them. They weren't going to back down. They weren't going to be able to run around and do the things like a normal soldier would, but from prepared positions, and they built a lot of prepared positions, and from areas which they knew like the back of their hands, and these soldiers would be first timers in, they were going to be launching ambushes. They were going to make the Germans pay for every inch. You don't mess with people like this. Now, who next? Who next? Well, it is Cuthbert Collingwood himself. And by the way, again, this is the guy I think of whenever people start telling me, oh, Cuthbert, that's such a sissy name. And I go, Admiral Collingwood was called Cuthbert. And he scared most of the world at one point. Testudones, there is nothing scarier than an animal backed in a corner. Nope. And there is nothing scarier than a grandfather who's protecting their grandkids. They have no qualms. Their grandkids are the future. They have lived their lives. They have nothing. They are not going to care. Right. Cuthbert Collingwood. He's, of course, most famous because he's Nelson's second in command and successor, good friend. He's not famous as a master in his own right, but he should be. He is absolutely amazing. And if Nelson hadn't been alive, Cuthbert Collingwood would be our god of war. So imagine that. People be talking about Cuthbert Collingwood rather than Horatio Nelson. He's proactive, he's creative, he's insightful. Was actually better than Nelson when it came to peacetime function of the fleet. Nelson was terrible in peacetime. Nelson couldn't deal with a peacetime navy. He was sent to patrol the Caribbean. He almost destroyed the Caribbean economy. He was really not good at peacetime. But he was great at war. That was the important thing for Nelson. Cuthbert, if I'm giving him anything in terms of World War II, he's getting command of the Mediterranean. Give him that and let him fight the battles. Right. Back in a second. I'm just going to go see if some printing's been done next door. Ooh, far too much exercise for an old man. Right then. So, Cuthbert Collingwood is critical. Sheppy 42, another one of those admirals who got bored with peace. Ian Greenlee, I love your comment, but I'm not gonna put that one out. Right. Right then. So, basically, actually no. I will. These notes. Also, Patton is the Allied commander. Was most likely to defect to Nazis. No, he wouldn't. Actually, to be honest, Patton. If anyone would hate the Nazism more than anyone, it's going to be Patton. Patton really. He's all for order and structure, but he loves freedom. And he hates. He's the sort of guy who would really, really hate someone being rude or saying different politics than him. But if anyone tried to shut that person up, he'd beat the person who was trying to shut them up, up. So basically, Patton's he's a good guy. All right. So, I'm just going to check TweetDeck and check if the right ones have come out. Yeah. So, next Admiral. After Cuthbert, and Cuthbert is a really, really cool... I'm surprised there's been no pushback over him commanding the Mediterranean Fleet. And I'm not surprised, actually, in a way, from you lot, because you're all pretty keen on naval history, so you know how good a quality it was. This one is probably going to get more of a pushback. Admiral Bruce Fraser. Now, I have a bit of a soft spot for Fraser because he was the guy who was given the task of being Third Sea Lord after Henderson died. He doesn't take it on for long because he gets sent out to sea commands, but he really is a good guy and he steps up. And his basic response to anything is what was Henderson's view and let's build it. And you have to love a guy who says that. Sheppy 42. Patton was not a nice man. Good general, but not nice. Agreed. Yeah. He is not a nice guy. But he's an honourable guy in his own way, and he has a code. So, Fraser. Well, what's he famous for? Being captured by Bolsheviks. Yeah. He was captured in the 1920 Royal Navy mission to Ezil. At the Battle of course, North Cape, when he was destroyed by the Scharnhorst. He destroyed the Scharnhorst, I mean. And taking command of the British Pacific Fleet and the Battle of Okinawa. Now, if you're looking for the British Pacific Fleet, you have this book. And this book as your two best options. I have to say, out of the two, if I was looking for a quick read, I'd be going for this one. If I'm looking for a longer read with all the detail, I'm going for this one. Because, honestly, this one and this one share a lot of similarities. They are very, very heavy going, full of information, but they are so good if you want that information. But if you're happier with actually just knowing what happened instead of the myth, this is very good. This is certainly one to go and read. Right, so Bruce Fraser is a really cool guy. As I said, he gets captured by the Bolsheviks. The interesting thing is, if I was sending him back in time, I'm not actually sending him back to a battle. Rare 4, can you create an Amazon affiliate link with all your book selections? I'm not sure if I can. I'll look into it. I have no idea what an affiliate link is. I will have to ask Drakenfernel. But I've seen Sam from Sam's Trains doing something similar to that. So I'll see if I can. Right. Let's look on here. Sometimes it's just easier to look at the questions on this one. Yes. Boyd, definitely. Where I took my view. David Foreman. Boyd's definitely where I took my view on Somerville from. Ian Greenley. A tuning 343. That was my understanding too. And true answer is any Nazi should be terrified of General Marshall. Yeah, pretty much. Ian Greenley. Yes, Patton was the man to lead from the front, not organise things at HQ. No, he really wasn't. Whereas Bruce Fraser really was a man to lead and organise an HQ. And this is why my recommendation for him was if anyone should go back in time and take charge of the transition from sail to steam, Bruce Fraser's your guy. Because he's absolutely brilliant. He's able to get a whole pack of engineers who are in shock after losing Henderson, who is the third Sea Lord they've known for the last 6 years and has basically become their god, to listen to him, to listen from them, to synthesize their advice and get them to move forward. That is an absolute feat of history, historical terms. And then he goes on to command at North Cape, to command all sorts of things. He does some really cool stuff. But he's so forgotten. And he is forgotten. He's a superstar, and he's forgotten. He shouldn't be. I do realise so far today I've probably... I've hopefully, you know, I've mentioned Sam's Train, so I'm really revealing my geekiness. And Hornby. If any of you didn't know from the model railway train, which starts off the re-recorded videos. Now, Alex Hunt, removing Scharnhorst from existence was pretty good work. It was, and it was a carefully managed operation. He basically does a massive naval pincer movement. And that is something to actually do, to be able to use your ships and command them, control them in such a way you can get a naval pincer movement going on. That is skill. So Jack Ray, so Admiral Fraser transitioned commands across the globe and was not caught out. That's interesting. He was able to adjust to that. He was very, very good at that. He was not always quite so good at politics and grand strategy in terms of he's a bit shocked by the Australian guy. It's going to sound strange. He believes what he's told by the Admiralty in London about the level of Australian support for the British Pacific Fleet when it's going to arrive. And it's only after he arrives he realises, oh, sugar, we've got to do a lot of work here. And then he does do the work. He basically doesn't do enough of that sort of thing. But he's a good admiral to study. Ian Greenley, Fraser is forgotten. I thought he, along with Somerville and Cunningham, were the most famous World War II admiral. Actually, no. It's going to sound strange. I do regular surveys with my students. Okay? And I do it with the engineering students, not the history students. A large number of them who've gone through the British system have heard of Cunningham. Occasionally they've heard of Somerville. Rarely have they heard of Fraser. Rarely have they heard of Fraser. And definitely not of Vian or anyone like that. So he gets a bit forgotten. But I've also put as a weakness is that he dies in 1981. And seeing as he'd spent the last 30 years arguing for the retention of the Royal Navy in the face of people going, nuclear weapons are now the case, You don't need a navy. Nuclear weapons will wipe out a navy. There's no point in a navy because we're not going to be fighting a war long enough for there to be convoys or anything. So you don't need a navy. You don't need amphibious warfare. You don't need carriers. We've got nuclear weapons. Da 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 da. He misses the Falklands War by a year. And I think he should have been around to see it happen because, by God, would he have loved being proved right. David Foreman, take care. Hope to see you in another one. Brock Payne, I will look forward to seeing a video of that. You're another proud railroad fan here, building a small World War I themed trench railroad. Ooh, I'd love to see videos of that. Jellicoe, we've actually done what he would command in World War II, I think. And if we've missed that one, or rather, if that's been missed, I'll quickly go to that one. He was one of the first ones. There it goes. Hornby, Beatty. Duncan. Jellicoe. Jellicoe, if he'd been... I've actually sent him back in time to command Quiberon Bay or against the Spanish Armada. He would have enjoyed those. That's what Jellicoe could have done. Right, so, now... the next Admiral. Sir Walter Raleigh. And you can see what's happening with the printing here. But, you know, it came out. So. Served now and again is what I put. Lived 50... We're not even sure when Sir Walter Raleigh was born. We think it was some point between 1552 and 1554. But no one is quite sure when Sir Walter Raleigh was born. Okay? Can we just pin this down? One of our national heroes, and we cannot remember where he was born. Well, rather when he was born. Knight Heron Production. Will John Tovey be on this list? John Tovey is actually on the list, but he hasn't printed out. So we may get to him today. We might not get to him today. Oh, Ian Greenlee, that's a little extreme. I would give my something to have witnessed the horizon turn from black to fire at Jutland when the Grand Fleet opened up. The Germans remembered it well in 1918. Yes, they did. And that was all of Jellicoe's plan. Now, Walter Raleigh. He's an interesting guy. He's a romantic. He is so many things. And Ian Greenlee, Roger Keyes. Yes, again, but I don't think he printed out either. So I'm having some issues with those, but I will go into them, but I won't have printings of them. Now, Walter is a rather dashing gentleman. And my point is that, frankly, if he was going to command anything in World War II, I reckon he would have had the carriers, especially escort carrier groups like that formed for Salerno. He was good with technology. He was good with managing people at sea. He was not so good at managing people ashore, and he was not so good at dealing with politics ashore. So a sort of middle-ranking command would have been quite good for Raleigh, and he'd been quite good at it. Ian Coombs. During World War I, Jellicoe lived at Aberdour House in Fife, the village I grew up in. I think he led the Grand Fleet out from Rosyth to the Battle of Jutland. I think it was Scarborough Flow, but he moved between the two. He had residences at both, and he moved between the two. He definitely did wander around. It was mainly the battle cruiser force, which was based down in Rosyth and moved further down. But Raleigh is a cool guy. I put Raleigh as a pull from Chicago, Raleigh on subs. No, I put him on escort carriers at Salerno. I think he would have been excellent for them. And I think it would have been very, very cool. Now, so far there's been one very big glaring missing officer from this whole summary. And if you're looking at World War II, there is one naval officer who you cannot ignore. Chappers and Bray. Beatty was at Rosyth and the Humber, wasn't he? Yes. But Jellicoe had a house near both because Jellicoe wandered down to check on what Beatty was doing. It was easier for Jellicoe to go to Beatty than Beatty to go to Jellicoe. Because Beatty had a habit of getting lost on trains. Is what I'm hearing. Science Cunningham. Yes, it is. It's Cunningham. Now, I chose this picture of Cunningham because, frankly, it's cool. And it shows Ernie King. Shows Cunningham. It shows all these officers hanging around. It's really quite a good picture. Chappers and Bray, what happens when the iron brew runs out? My girlfriend thought of this. As well as there being a lot more cans downstairs, there is an emergency bottle of the really good stuff, just in case. But it's probably better for me not to drink that much iron brew in less than 3 hours. Although I can and have in the past. Anyway, so, he's famous for the battles of Calabria and Cape Matapan, for the carrier strike on Taranto, and for Operations Torch and Husky. I think if I was going to put Cunningham back in time, and this is where I'm going to get controversial, I'd put him on a North America station during the War for Independence. I have a feeling with his knowledge and his sense of timing and his motivations, the War for Independence might have gone a little bit different for the Americans. Definitely the French would have found it less ability to be helpful. Pat W. How about Raleigh and the tribals in Indian and South Pacific Oceans? No. Keep Raleigh away from the tribals. You need to be... The tribals are an elite, very efficient force. You don't want Raleigh anywhere near them. He's not that type of commander. Ian Greenley, I bought a bottle of iron brew today. First time in 20 years. See? It works. Iron brew should be sponsoring me. Ian Greenley, not for drinking, for launching HMS Furious 1932. Yes, I like it. Oh. So, basically, if Cunningham had been there, on a North American station, they would have, in the War of Independence, they would have definitely had a different time. Alex Hunt, someone's not very good when Dr. Clark doesn't want them on his beloved tribals. Basically, for the tribals, I want a very specific type of officer. They've got to be very aggressive and very good at their job. Pretty much, they've got to be the best you can get. I might have let Nelson command them, I suppose. We'll talk about that in a bit. So, probably it's insane that Paul from Chicago, it's insane that we, the French, won that war at sea. Never should have happened. Yes, and this is my point. If Cunningham had been out there, it wouldn't have happened. Because Cunningham was very good at organising the army as well as the navy. So the army wouldn't have been sitting around in New York doing nothing and various other points in the battle doing nothing. They would have been quite well coordinated because he would have been coordinating them. Never mind anyone across the Atlantic trying it. Cunningham would have been doing it. Banhome, a distinct lack of town class commanders. Yeah, there's no one really fitted it yet. There are a couple coming through. Seam White, who's the Alfred Fair Mahan of the Royal Navy? Try and remember who worked out and changed the tactics of fighting sail. You'd be looking at a gentleman called Corbett. I have one of his books around here somewhere. Ah, yes. Julian Corbett. Some Principles of Maritime Strategy. It's all Royal Navy's approach to warfare at sea rather than American. Alex Hunt. Oh, well, sorry, Americans. Time to build a time machine. Cunningham is an excellent officer, and if anyone could have changed that, it would have been him. Oh, I think Ian Greenlee, Togo Jutland. I have done a Royal Navy version of this. I think doing an international version of this could be fun. Maybe longer term, I will do an international version of this. So, just making sure the next tweet goes up. And the next tweet you're going to enjoy. Because next Admiral up is Hood. Now, before anyone thinks I have anything really against Raleigh, I should admit that my dog, is the fluffy research assistant, is actually called Raleigh. My mum wanted a perfect gentleman. She got a bit of a food explorer and a bit of a pirate. But, you know, he's a fluffy research assistant. Now, the next officer, as I've said, is Hood. And Hood is a special officer. Hood is... Actually, yes, I would have put Hood in command of the Hood, definitely. Actually, I was planning and... Okay, hold it up again. It didn't focus. Right. If I was going to give Hood anything, I felt he should have Force H. For starters, he'd have no qualms about Mirza Kabir's. Frankly, if it had been blowing up the French, he'd have been just as happy as blowing up the Germans. He's the Battle of Sens, Chesapeake, Monopassage. He does all these. And he's Nelson's mentor. And of course, a battle cruiser is named after him. But Hood is really, really, really good. If I'm not... Am I using the new webcam? I am not using the new webcam, and the reason I'm not is because it's manual focus and it's not working with things at the moment. I've got to basically sort it all out. It was all bought and all working at one point, and then it stopped working once I actually tried to get it to work for real. When every time I practiced them, it worked fine, and then whenever I turned it on for real, it failed. So, Hood would be very, very cool. And I'm Alex Hunt. Various ships named Hood also turn up in the Star Trek series. They should. He is a very, very good officer. There have been more than one Admiral Hood. The one particular one I'm going for, and I forgot, is the main one. It's the first Samuel Hood. He's a good officer. He's a good commander, and he is Nelson's mentor. He is the one who inspires Nelson, who inspires Collingwood, who inspires this entire generation of naval officers who come forward. But Ian Greenlee, Ian Coombs, a mistake. It was Beatty who resided at our house and led the battlecruiser Cochrane. I think actually Jellicoe was also there at several points. So I don't think you're completely wrong. I think Beatty was permanently there. But Jellicoe, as I said, in my experience, from my understanding, does come down quite a bit to the battlecruiser force and then battlecruiser fleet to try and keep an eye on things. Because they were technically part of his fleet. And he didn't always have the most trust in Beatty. Ian Greenlee, St. John Jervis at Matapan. No, we've already decided. The Earl St. Vincent's job is going to be First Sea Lord in World War II, so it's him versus Churchill. We all want to see that. Jervis v. Churchill. Ding ding! Let the battle commence! Yeah! No. Hood is a really, really, really cool officer, and he's good. So, Who do we have after Hood? We have Bertram Ramsay. Another officer who doesn't get enough attention. Does not get anywhere near enough attention. Now, incredibly detail-orientated and passionate leader, very capable of speaking truth to power. His most amazing thing is when he tells the King and Churchill they are not going anywhere near D-Day on HMS Belfast. I think if he went back in time, and he's famous for Dunkirk, he's famous for D-Day, he's famous for so many different operations he takes part in and commands. And by the way, here's one of the enjoying bits of history. Often in history, when you're looking at the popular one, it said the big decision was made by Eisenhower as to whether or not the fleet would go. No. The big decision as to whether or not the fleet would go was made by this man. It had to be. Eisenhower had to delegate it to him. Because to get the ships moving, once you get the ships moving, it's very difficult to pull them back. Once you've got a fleet, an armada of that size sailing, it's very difficult to get them back. So basically, Eisenhower goes, here's a bracket, you have my permission, you make the final decision. And it's Ramsay who has to go. Ian Greenley, there was a Churchill at D-Day, waded ashore with a claymore and longbow. Yes, Mad Jack Churchill was there, but Mad Jack Churchill gets everywhere, okay? Mad Jack Churchill lives up to his name. Bertram Ramsay is really, really critical to World War II, to everything that happens. And if sent back in time, I would have him replace Wolfe and actually take charge of Quebec, because if anyone could have turned the siege and capture of Quebec into a far more successful operation, it's this guy. Vice Admiral Nelson, please let Cochrane be in command of HMS Glowworm. If anyone could have turned that around and actually sunk it would have been him. No. Sorry. Cochrane's already been done. That particular paranoid officer has been put down in the South Atlantic. And he's staying there. Testudains, give Mad Jack a Churchill a tribal. Change my mind. Actually, if any Mad Army officer was going to get a tribal, that Mad Jack Churchill is pretty much about the level you're talking about. Right then. So, the next set of admirals. And unfortunately, Ian Grinley, I had a Chilean girlfriend. To Chileans, Cochrane is second only to God. Yes, he is. But even then, he managed to get into fights and arguments with them. Even when he's in basically Supreme Naval Command and is a Vice Admiral, he gets into arguments with people. It's amazing. Right then, so this was set 3. Okay? You will notice that there is Nelson, Pellew, Hawke, Howard, Effingham, Rodney, Tovey, Clapp, Noble, Keyes and Horton. This is the set which only 2 of them have printed. So I will happily go through them, but they haven't printed. Okay? Quickly put no. Ian Greenley. Now I've got an officer for Trafalgar. I have. But let's start off with Horatio Nelson. Okay. Now, there has been a lot about him. Sheppy 42. Well, I think Dunkirk proves Ramsay's organisational skills, let alone D-Day. Correct. Yes, definitely passing the 2-hour mark. Horatio Nelson. So, he is, of course, the superstar. He is the god of the war. He's an exceedingly dedicated professional sailor. He is everything. And I'll load up TweetDeck. That you want. In so many ways. In so many ways. But now, he has terrible personal life, so he's not that good in some respects. He's not overrated, but he's also not underrated. But to quote one historian, and to be honest, to quote one of my favourite historians, Andrew Lambert, he's Britain's god of war. And I would just add to this, agree with Ian Greenley, the ops room at Dover Castle is well worth a visit. They have a lovely mannequin of the Ramsay in the map table and is set to show Dunkirk, not D-Day. Yes, it's very much worth a visit. So, anyway, getting back to Nelson. Nelson should, as Paul from Chicago says, should be locked in a cupboard with a sign that says open in case of war. And there is only one officer in the entire history of the Royal Navy who I would send back in time, send forward in time, and one point where I put him there. If anyone could replace Somerville in the Indian Ocean and beat the Japanese, it is Horatio Nelson. Now, I know this probably sounds egotistical, but let's be honest. Nelson is... okay, he doesn't mind about multiple people's wives and all sorts of different fun things, which are the stories which go around him, but he is a undoubtedly lucky, undoubtedly hard work professional, and undoubtedly successful naval commander who pulls off entirely things against the odds without worrying about it. Doesn't worry about the odds at all. If anyone is going to beat the Japanese in the Indian Ocean in 1943, it would be Admiral Nelson. That is your only chance. That's your only opportunity. So, would Nelson have commanded the A forces as Sam Shaker? He could have done, but he would have commanded the Indian Ocean Fleet. He would definitely have commanded the Eastern Fleet. And he would have been... okay, he's the only chance. Who knows if he'd have been successful? But, honestly, he's the only chance who got it. He would probably have ended up nicking a Maharaja's daughter or wife and running off with her at some point. But he would have still, if anyone has a chance of beating the Japanese, he would have done it. Yes, Clapping did NHS. So, as I've not stopped for that, I'm just going to do that quickly now. There are literally people blowing whistles and banging pans outside. Nelson is key for this. And it sounds like my dog's woofing as well for the NHS. Good puppy dog. Actually, let's see if you can see him. Sorry for moving the camera. There you go. There's the puppy down there. So, back. Right. I'll reconnect to the power supply. Does Admiral King have a daughter? Yes, actually, and I actually have a reason why Admiral King was so annoyed with the world. He had 6 daughters. Okay? That man wouldn't have got a word in edgeways at home. 6 daughters. Imagine. Do you think he ever managed to get to use the bathroom? I have a lot of female cousins. I understand this, joy, and currently living at home with my sister and my mother. The nicest way, getting to the poor man. I can understand him. Right. But, So, Nelson is cool. Nelson is the only one for the Indian Ocean. But you'll notice there is a battle I have ignored the whole way through. And I should probably get to it now. And I will do. Because I have one other person who's printed through. And I made sure to print this one off. And in fact, this one got printed off first, along with Nelson's. So, to make sure the printer worked. And this is a guy called Michael Clapp. Now, I don't know if any of you have heard of Michael Clapp before. I certainly hope you have. I do know that while there is a Spanish speaking Wikipedia page, there is no English Wikipedia page about him. He is the task group commander from the amphibious task group in the Falklands War. And he is an amazing, amazing officer. Okay? During the Indonesian confrontation, he was in charge of one of the smaller ships out there. And at one point, he is overflown by jet fighters. He has small boats coming in, everything. And he keeps his crew's morale and doesn't fire back. No matter how they're provoked, he manages to keep the professionalism. Will C 99. I've met Commodore Clapp. Yes. Anyone who's met Commodore Clapp will know exactly what I'm saying when I say how great he is. I will just add Beatty Durant. Admiral King's daughter, one of them, best King quote, "My father is the most even-tempered man I know. He's always mad." There are so many quotes about Admiral King like that. But let's be honest, the man is a very good strategic commander. As we see, Michael Clapp is an incredibly interesting person, and he's incredibly forgotten in history, because one of the debates I often have, and I'll be getting to this on the 21st of May when I am doing one on the Falklands War, is how often I am told that Sandy Woodward is the task force commander. He's not. He's a task group commander. Task force commander is back in the UK. It's Leach. Michael Clapp is the task group commander of the amphibious task group. So he's the one in charge of the inshore. He's the one in charge of the amphibious landings. He's the one who's getting the Royal Marines ashore. And he's the one who keeps his crews together under constant air attack, under all these things. He is far too modest and not really good at the press game, but he's an excellent commanding officer. He makes the decisions, he bears up under pressure, he's got all these things coming on, and he keeps on making decisions. He is the ultimate professional. And the fact that the Royal Navy let him go at Commodore, Captain, technically, because Commodore wasn't a permanent rank at that time, is beyond belief silly. In the nicest way. I do know the story that the Royal Navy then rang him up a few months after he left the Royal Navy. And this is after the Falklands War. And they said, actually, no, we'd really like you back, because it turns out we do need someone who's an amphibious warfare specialist, a naval aviation specialist, and someone who managed to successfully make the case to retain the landing platform docks, because it was Clapp who made the cases and stopped the ships being cut before the Falklands War. If it hadn't been for Clapp doing a sort of Henderson approach and getting these ships saved, they would have been lost before the war even began. So my point is that if anyone, and when I actually discussed this with my girlfriend, she told me if I came up with a different assessment, she would stop sending me iron brew. Michael Clapp, if I'm sending anyone back to command the Battle of Trafalgar, it's him. Because no one else is as good as he is. And I'm very glad to call him my friend. He's still alive. There is a book written by him, which I now can't see. I did get out earlier, but I've now put away somewhere and I can't spot it. And frankly, if you can get... it's San Carlos Water. Look it up quickly. Michael Clapp's book. All right. If you haven't got this, go get it. Michael Clapp his book is probably one of the best things to read if you want to understand the Falklands War. If you want to know what happened, if you want to know the full story of it, Michael Clapp thoroughly researched it and, of course, was there as the commander of it. And he is an absolutely amazing person. I have been so happy to have worked with him on several occasions, interviewed him for my bachelor's dissertation, and he came and spoke at a conference I organised on the Falklands War, all sorts of things. He is amazing. Read his book, look him up. The fact that there's no Wikipedia page about him, I take as a personal insult. I'm not going to set it up because if I start writing Wikipedia pages, I will never finish it. But the fact that the only Wikipedia page about this man is in Spanish, not English, shows so much about the history of the Falklands War as it's been learned and as it's been taught. There are all sorts of things which have made a difference to the Falklands War. In Greenland, a squadron of F4 Phantoms and HMS Ark Royal made a huge difference. Actually, it wouldn't have been the F4 Phantoms. You could have still done it with the Sea Harriers. But what would have been useful would have been AWACS. Any form of AWACS. The Gannets providing AWACS, airborne early warning, would have been absolutely amazing. The AEW Gannets. Anything to provide airborne early warning is what they needed. And actually, if you talk to Michael Clapp, he would have sat there and he will sit there and tell you, actually, what we needed was the helicopter AWACS, because we could have the helicopter AWs could launch from inside San Carlos Water. They could have launched from the back of the LPDs. So you could have forward based them far easier than you could have the Gannets. The Gannets would have been flying from the carriers. And Night Heron production, or Buccaneers. Well, yes, if there had been some Buccaneers there would have been interesting. Jeff Beeler, which animals do you want at Jutland for a more decisive result? Well, honestly, what you need to get a more decisive result at Jutland isn't a replacement of Jellicoe, it's a replacement of Beatty. In which case, you need a better second in command. So you're looking at Collingwood, who's good at communication. So you're looking at Collingwood and you're looking at... Sidney Smith. Collingwood or Sidney Smith is who I would replace Beatty with. If I was looking at the First World War and replacing Beatty. Because that's who I'd be replacing. I wouldn't be replacing Jellicoe. Jellicoe pulls off a magic trick. Alex Hunt, on the Falklands, what's the decision to separate Summery to Woodland's command a mistake? It would have been virtually impossible for him to coordinate them. He had like 2 officers with him who could speak to submarines, and the communications didn't always work that well, whereas back from Northwood, it made sense. So they were all different task groups under the task force. Yes. It's Robert Lewis. Dr. Clark, your link led to a book by Michael Clapp about the Falklands War. It does, and it leads to this book, this is Michael Clapp. He was the Commodore of the Amphibious Task Group in 1982. If you haven't read it and you're interested in the Falklands War, that is the book to go and get. That is the book to read because he is absolutely amazing. Take care, 42 Breckman. I'm going to carry on answering questions for a while. As I've said, most of the slides for the last section haven't printed out, or they've printed out very badly. So I'm sort of answering questions now about admirals, and this sort of turning this into more of a general discussion. Carl Harman, what 3 things would you do to improve the current Royal Navy? They need more... Well, they need more ships of everything. They need more personnel especially, and they need the funding to support all that. So you basically need a stronger British economy which can provide the money. And you therefore, the money needs to be spent on providing more personnel first, and then you can provide more ships. And the ships would be sort of things like, I would replace Albion and Bulwark and Ocean with 3 LHDs. I would be building another 6 destroyers, probably based on the Type 31s. I would be increasing Type 26 by to 18. I'd be increasing Type 31 by to 12. I'd be increasing the RFAs. I'd probably be increasing the SSNs and buying some SSKs to try and give us more submarine force. Basically, we have very good ships. You just need slightly more of them. And the reason I'd be basing the other destroyers off the Type 31 class is because then you would be having 18 or so of a similar hull, and that's far easier to maintain. Right then. Harry Chris 44, Night Heron production. Not sure about the Bucks. Precision bombers, not what the Arrow needed at the time as much. No, but you can always make use of precision bombers. You can always make use of precision bombers. You could have taken out a certain airfield quite easily. You could have challenged a lot more of the Argentinian security forces and apparatus around the field, and you provided combat air on-call air support. So that would have been quite useful. Jellicoe didn't have the same sycophants around him as Beatty, Hornby. No, he didn't. And I do agree Andrew Lambert is in awe of Jellicoe, Bandholm, but he's in awe of him for a good reason. Without virtually any information, he manages to cross the German T twice. That's pretty much entirely worked in his head. Now that I have Undaunted Fun, now that I have had a good lecture on Admirals, I need to go play Hearts of Iron 2 and run around with the World RN. That's good time. Have fun. Will C99 should have had our Admiral Reffel forward as OTC, Deputy Task Force Commander, under Fieldhouse, but above Woodward Clapp. Yes, in fact, Reffel's entire job, he was the Vice Admiral aircraft carriers and amphibious ships. If anyone is supposed to be in the freaking South Atlantic, and I did an entire dissertation on this, Reffel should have been sent. The fact that he was taken out of the command structure was the most short-sighted, most stupid thing they could have done. And I do apologise for getting so excited, but really, Reffel should have been south. He should have been down there. He should have been on board HMS Bristol or a county class down south giving instructions. And I will tone it down now. I do apologise. Ian Greenlee, we need something other than F-35s for HMS Queen Elizabeth. At the moment, F-35s are what we get. Let us work it up. You can change an air group far easier than you can change a carrier. So let's get the carrier working. Let's see. Which RN Admiral, not Schleppy 42, add Dr. Alexander Clark, which RN Admiral, not Cunningham, would you put in charge of the Japanese at Pearl Harbor? If I wanted the US Navy annihilated, it would be Vian. Literally. It would be Vian. I could think of others who were equally cold-hearted and would annihilate things, but Vian would do it very, very efficiently. Nighthand production. The Falklands, if along with Belgrano getting torpedoed by the Argentinian carrier was sunk, what effect would have that on huge morale blows to the Argentinians? If the Vincent de Meo had been sunk, the Argentinian morale would have gone down, but it would have also kept on fighting. In nicest way, they would have kept fighting until they were taken off to the shore, until they were beaten on land. Harry Chris 444. Did the Bucks have enough payload for combat air support? Bucks are ace. Don't get me wrong, but one has an FX. Actually, they did. They do it in. I think they do. So the Buccaneers are something used for in the first Gulf War, but I'm not 100% sure. They do combat air support quite well. And remember, they designed as anti-ship weapons. They're designed to take out the Svuldov class. I've done an entire paper about them on that one. They're really good. Blue Shirt Buddha. What the British truly need in the Falklands War was a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier. No. Sorry, no. They didn't have the manpower for it. It would be a lovely thing to have, but the Nimitz-class aircraft carrier absorbs about 5,000 to 6,000 people, and that's about a quarter of the Royal Navy's force deployed down south. No, you can't do it. Queen Elizabeth class is designed for Lee Manning for a reason. Tis Francis' fault. Okay, let's see. Tis Francis' fault. How do you think Jackie Fisher would have handled Jutland if he was in command? He would have been shooting Beatty for not giving him information. He would have been committing Harry Kerry. Jackie Fisher would have gone absolutely nuclear on Beatty's butt for that one. Jellicoe was quite polite over it. Jackie Fisher would have literally picked him up, done a Duncan, picked him up, but not let go, just dropped him in the sea. Steve White, when reading up on the US brigs during War of 1812, and they probably were far-ranging, dangerous into British attractions focused on the frigates, they did get further because the British were obsessing on the frigates. Bucks were used for Alex Hunt. Bucks were used for lasing targets in this war. Bucks were incredibly accurate. Ian Greenwick, Colonel Martinez, as your commander, you keep fighting. Otherwise, he'd throw you out of a sea further of the South Atlantic. Probably. Sam Shakira, off topic, about ships magazines. Is it in handling room or handling room? Is it with or without an L in spelling? It's driving me nuts. Handling room. Handling, because you're handling the stuff. So it's handling usually. Harry Chris 44, add Alex Hunt, yeah, which wasn't what they were designed for. They weren't designed for things, but that doesn't mean they couldn't do it. And in the nicest way, the Buccaneers were very, very good for their time, and they would have been still very good in the 1980s off Ark Royal. Although, in the nicest way, if I'd had my choice and I was going for time again, I would probably still lost the Ark Royal, but I would have had the illustrious Invincible class about 10,000 tons bigger and a bit longer. A bit tougher and having a bit more aircraft. I'd still gone with F-30 with Harriers, but I'd have had Sea Kings with AEW fitted from the beginning. Night Heron production. Could an audacious class even operate during the Falklands War practically? I've heard the Sea State was 90% of the time too poor for conventional aircraft launches. Just remember, Sea State is also a factor of the size of the ship. The bigger the ship tends to be slightly more stable you are in the Sea State, so they could have probably got away with operating it. I remember, I remember reading Fisher saying, I've spent years preparing the RM for this moment, and they failed me. He was gutted by the RM's performance. He was gutted by Beatty's performance. Even though he wasn't in command, he wanted to hunt down Beatty and execute him. Right now, 6th can of Iron Brew in one talking session. You're doing wonders for my waistline, everyone. Actually. More point. Woo! Brownie left. Ian Greenley, on shells, there's a fantastic illustration of a 15-inch green buoy in the front of 1948 brasses I found today. I must scan it. If you do scan it, can you tweet it at me? Sounds cool. Harry Chris 444. I said I love the Buck. Don't knock me. We're not knocking you. We're just standing up for the Buccaneer. Sheppy42 at Dr. Alexander Clark. Without hindsight, was Hood and Prince of Wales enough of a force to pursue Bismarck and Prince Eugen? Seems like a lack of escort to me. Yes, well, that was what the tribal class felt. Let's be honest. That was what the tribal class felt. But it was as much force as they could go to sea with, as they didn't have... It's going to sound strange. The seas were rough enough, regular destroyers had to go back. But they were... And even the elite destroyer, but the tribals probably wouldn't have gone back. The tribals would have gone, you can try and get rid of us over our dead bodies. Ian Greenhouse, Seymour as flag officer at Trafalgar, we'd be doing this stream on Francais. Seymour... Look, you have to remember, Beatty marries his wife, he spends his entire life in search for social connections, because that's how he rises up. Picking Seymour as his flag lieutenant makes a lot of sense for him. We could all consider that the fact that Jellicoe, when First Sea Lord, picks Henderson as one of his senior staff officers makes a big difference. Curium 96. I have to drive from my home in northern Germany for 30 minutes to get Iron Brew from Denmark. That's worth it though. It's Iron Brew. Come on. 30 minutes? Hell, to find... Excuse the French there. To find the particular pub which does serve Iron Brew in Surrey, it's at least a 30-minute drive. This is all actually another reason why Michael Clapp needs to be... You need to read Michael Clapp's book. If you like Buccaneers, this is the guy who's the first observer to command a Buccaneer squadron. But more importantly than that, he commands the first Mark II Buccaneers. And some of the stuff he describes getting up into them is... And he's still alive! You can go and see him. You can meet him. He comes to conferences and he gives talks. The fact that we do not make a bigger fuss over him than we do is just absurd. This is one of the best naval officers the Royal Navy's produced in the last 100-odd years, and we barely make any notice of him. Sammy Shikar, I've read in Bruce Taylor's book about HMS Hood how she fired a 15-inch shrapnel at shudding aircraft. Is that kind of effective as desperate AA munitions? Actually, 15-inch shrapnel is very effective as AA munitions. Basically, it's you're firing a massive shotgun. Okay? Just consider that as an AA shotgun. And whilst it's not particularly long range, any aircraft gets within that cone of destruction, there is not much aircraft left. It's kind of like the 8-inch shotguns. Band Home, you could ask Michael Clapp to do an interview for YouTube. I might do that at some point, just so we can all fangirl over him. If I do that, then I think he would be very popular, because you would all enjoy listening to him chat. Although I also think, having Skyped with him in the past, I think it could be quite fun. Thank you for History Productions. I'm not sure what you're who just subscribed. Thank you. Thank you. All subscribers are all more than welcome. Night Heron Productions. Since Hood is being spoken about and AA was just brought up, any chance of video on a spearfish incident in the future? I know it might take it to be a 10-minute video only, but it's an event I don't hear much about. Yeah, I'll have a look at it. Military History Productions. Thank you. Ian Greenley, Alex, ever studied a Corbetta Uruguay base seized on stolen fuel? Deeply fascinating me. Yes, I have. I might do something about that. Alex Hunt, I mean, even the Tribals wouldn't have saved the Hood. The Tribals might not have saved the Hood, but by God, the Bismarck wouldn't have got away from them. Let's be honest. Philip Vian and the Tribals there with the Hood gets sunk, maybe, still, they get the lucky shot in. Remember, they've got to make that shot while now under attack by destroyers as well as battleships. It makes life more complicated for them. And it's just nightmare. You know, in nicest way, the Tribals would not have backed down. They would have had to massacre the Tribals as well as sink the Hood. You've got Prince of Wales operating now a destroyer screen. It changes things up, the Tribals being there. Plough guy, it's not exactly a shotgun, more like a sphere full of shrapnel. Yeah, yes, it is. I would agree. It's more like a sphere. It's sort of bigger than a shotgun, but a shotgun is a sort of similar approach. You've got all these pellets coming at you, this big mist of pellets coming at you from a shotgun, and it's the same with a shrapnel shell. Schleppy 42, the Japanese had a Type 3 beehive for battleship guns. The Americans weren't impressed. The Americans weren't impressed, no, but they also didn't like them that much. And they did a lot of damage to the guns themselves, the barrels when firing. Night Heron Productions, sinking the Hood in front of the Troubles would have been like punching a beehive to kill the Queen. Nothing good coming from it. No! Nothing good would have come from it. Bismarck would maybe have got away, but probably not. Bandholm, in all fairness, were the German battleships better designed than the Iron battleships at the time? No, they were designed differently. Honestly, there is a lot of different designs. They're not better designed, they're designed in a different way. And I would say they have some advantages, they have some disadvantages. There is a reason why the Germans don't like to get into a capital ship fight with the British. Because, you know, in the nicest way, Scharnhorst and Eisenhower versus the lovely Rodney, and not the Rodney, the lovely Renown, and they're running. You know, Rodney, Nelson turn up, they're in really, we're not going to be there. The King George V class, but if they built the Tiger class, they would have certainly had equivalents of them. And Alex Hunt, I don't know. Prince Hood goes down. Prince Jürgen can focus on down the Hood, down the Tribals probably. Bismarck also has fairly heavy secondaries for dealing with destroyers. That's true, but let's talk. If we're talking hypotheticals, we are talking the Prince Jürgen and the Bismarck versus the Hood, the Prince of Wales, 4 Tribals, and ORP Piran. There are 5 destroyers in that mix now. So you've got 5 destroyers who probably are going to be doing manoeuvring around. So you've got a manoeuvre to deal with them. So yes, your guns might be able to fight them off, but you're going to have to be manoeuvring to counter them. So they start to enter a lot of different factors into it. And you might still get your lucky shot on the HMS Hood. You might still, but you might not. You might not get the lucky shot. And if you don't get the lucky shot, Hood's still engaged. And longer Hood's still fighting and the Prince of Wales are still fighting and you've still got those tribes to deal with, you might have that secondary battery. But remember, how well does Bismarck's secondary battery do against the Tribals later in that night in their hunt? Okay, yes, they've taken more damage, but the damage they've taken, which has caused them to be their radars not to be so good at dealing with them in the night, is the damage done by the Prince of Wales, by the Hood in battle. And that's after they've managed to repair it. So, let's be honest, if they're still firing, are they going to be able to accurately engage the Tribals? So, let's know. Okay. In your opinion, which was the better class of fleet destroyer, Tribal class or Fletcher class? If you're an American Navy, the Fletcher class better suits what you wanted on. Because you want super destroyers. You want ships which are going to be launching a hailstorm of torpedoes. If you're the Royal Navy and you're looking for a cruiser substitute, that's going to be an independent ship to take your picket line, to do your scouting, to protect other destroyers, the Tribals are better. They're both very good designs, but they're better for the different ways for what they want to do. Streppy 42, Dr. Angus and Clark. Yeah, but while the KGBs had a somewhat limp armaments, they had some really good armour and did some good work still. Yes, they did. So that's the thing. You have advantages, disadvantages for what's made choice of. Salim Shekir, how did Hood direct the 15-inch AA shrapnel? With HA directors on the main gun directory? What about other British ships? They used their high-angle directory systems. So, you know. It's their primary. And Chaffers and Bray, the Germany's secondary fire control was generally awful. It was. It really, really was. But remember, they're taking damage from Prince of Wales. They're taking damage from Hood. They are not going to be able to hold this up. And with destroyers also engaging, yeah. No, the really interesting thing for me when I'm looking at this battle is I'm thinking about which officers I would have in command, what I'd be doing it. The commander in Hood is actually a very good admiral. He's a very good officer. But he only has 2 ships to play with and he gets unlucky. And this is where the luck comes in. He wasn't lucky enough. And luck is a factor. Okay, Scipio Africanus. A, very cool name. My favourite Roman general. B, was it only incompetence that doomed the SS Normandy when she burned and capsized New York in February 1942? Probably. And how could she have been saved? A lot of tugboats. And I say, could I ask about the US freshers sinking? I'd have to do some more research on that. I've only read one book on that one, so I'd like to read more before I talk about that, but I'm happy to talk about it sometime in the future. Night Heron Productions. That's one of the things about Denmark's straight battle that annoys me. Everyone thinks Hood is a paper tiger, whilst thinking Bismarck is a beast, all while taking no consideration for damn good luck. Yeah. And Hood is not a paper tiger. Hood hasn't been through the equivalent of the Renown upgrade, so she's not as fully strong as she could have been, but she is good. Chaffers and Bray, we had developed an 18-inch but tried to limit to 14-inch. We had a damn good 15 and 16-inch guns ready to go. Henderson preferred the 15-inch gun because he thought he could standardise with the Queen Elizabeth class, but ours preferred the 16-inch guns like Nelson and Rodney had, and that was what they were going to put on the Tigers. So there's all sorts of fighting over what it's going to be, but they went with 14-inch because Chatfield thought that would lead the world, and it didn't. Alex Hunt, if we're talking hypothetical battleships, let's go to whole hog and build G3. No, don't build the G3s. They have all sorts of issues in them. They look really good on paper. Really not good in long-term reality. They could have been interesting, but no, I don't think so. I think more interesting than the G3s were the Tiger class. If we could have built anything, I would have loved the Tiger classes to be accelerated at the expense of the King George V's. If they'd been built instead, it would have been better. Jeff Beeler, no iron brew here in Canada where I live. Seriously, what is the huge Scottish population in Canada doing if they haven't imported iron brew? Goodness gracious me. Okay, what's wrong with the G3s? Now, don't take this the wrong way. They are actually great battleships for World War I, but they are going to need a lot of reform for World War II because their whole design and where the engines have been placed and the trunking and everything, to actually upgrade them for World War II with the air defences and things that need to be put in, would have been major, major work. So no. Right. Chevy 42. Hood was an awesome ship that could, in theory, go toe-to-toe with most possible enemy casual ships in the world, but she really needed a refit. Yes, she did. She did. She needed a refit. Oh, Ian Greenley. Oh, yes, please send me a picture. My revised Nelson model, which I moved center turret to the stern, looks 100 times better than the G3. Yes, it would do. Please send it through to me on Twitter if you can. Ian Greenley, I finally met a not pleasant Canadian today on YouTube because... let's see. I finally dare to say I thought Elkins killed Whitman, not the Sherbrooks. Ooh, that could be trouble. Skipping reference, thank you very much. I wrote U-boat assault on America. Why the US was unprepared for war in the Atlantic. I write that Admiral Andrews, Commodore of the Eastern Fleet, was a mediocrity. Yeah, definitely interesting. So, Michael Rose. So Canada has a tribal class destroyer but no iron brew. That might be why the tribal class destroyer has survived, because they haven't turned it into an iron brew. Maybe. Bad Home. Would the Crown class have been good in the Falklands? And would a gun missile cruiser be worth it? Ooh. Maybe, but as I said, I actually did a question the other day on the 49 Daring class, and I would have actually said preferred them in the Falklands, because with their 6 4.5-inch guns, they've been very useful with the existing munitions we had. Night Heron production. Why did Hermes R12 go for a forward waist elevator over centerline one? The only RN carrying out that prior to this QEs was RN9 Ark Royal in its original configuration, to make space for Buccaneers and basically later aircraft, so they could lift them up. Perry Rodham. Further, it is my opinion that you need a Discord server at Dr. Alex Clark. I have one. I do have a Discord server. I cannot remember what it is, but I do have one. I set it up so I could do my interview and chat with Drac. So I have one, and it's up there and it's working. Alex Hunt. Is it a lack of room for dual-purpose guns or a lack of room for 40mm that dams the G3? Both. And their controllers and the electronics and all the stuff which need to support them. Basically, to refit those things to World War II standard would have been a nightmare. It could have been done, but it's a nightmare. Jeff Beeler, which Hood? Samuel Hood. Right then. Oh, good Lord. It's 2 hours and 42 minutes. So, I'm going to say... final questions, please, because once it gets closer to the 3-hour mark, I would like to go have some food, seeing as all I've eaten today so far is iron brew and a chocolate brownie, because I've been working all day and I forgot. Yeah, I know. My girlfriend and my mother both like to tell me off for lack of eating. I think both consider me slightly worrying on this front. So, Sheppy42. At Chaffson Bray, problem, there is a North Carolina, Washington, where American and had their guns upgraded while under construction because the escalator got invoked. Yep, they did. Tis Francis' fault, but what about the N3s? The Nelsons were cool, but the N3s would have been great. They would have been interesting, but it's upgrading them. Most of the ones built on the First World War ones, they're so First World War orientated, it's going to be difficult to upgrade them, actually. Perry Roden, what is the name of this Discord? I cannot remember. I do have it. I will post it at some point. I'll put it on Twitter. Night Heron production. If this is too complicated, I'll ask another time. Is there any scenario in which Northern Norway could have been held by the Free French, by the end if they're still there in 940? Yes. If they had reinforced the central attack. If they had reinforced Namsos and given General Carleton de Weert enough troops, he could have held the centre. Then they could have reinforced from the Northern Norway, come down with the Norwegian troops after they'd beaten the Germans up there, come south and kick the Germans out of Norway completely. They could have done it. But they didn't send enough troops to the centre. They wasted troops on the southern attack, and then they tried to go in on the northern, and they didn't have enough. It's just terrible. Carleton de Weert in the centre of Norway is the key if you can give him enough troops. Sorry. Get very passionate about that. Alex Hunt. Drac has indoctrinated the cult of G3 entry. Yes, and they are wonderful ships. But, as I said, I don't think they're that great for upgrading into World War II, and I think they could be more problem than good. And he and I have a fun discussion about this occasionally. Oh, and just before anyone gets into it, everyone cheated the various clauses in the treaty in their own way. Trust me, the Royal Navy were very good at adding up the sums to suit them as well. Right. Night Heron Production. I think I triggered. Sorry. No. That's fine. Right. So. Nah, Alex Hunt, you and he should video. Actually, there is something interesting. We're organising a podcast with Jamie from Armoured Carriers, and it's going to be called Bilge Pumps, and we're recording them now, and they're going to be a series of free released, and if everyone likes them, we'll carry on doing more. So there's a podcast series coming out, which is me, Drac, and Armoured Carriers sitting, chatting on Skype and basically talking about current affairs and naval history and having all sorts of fun. Right, so. Paul from Chicago. Did the RN build their interwar ships undergunned with the intent to upgrade? The RN built their interwar ships with the intent to upgrade them, not by necessarily upgunning them, but by adding in more fuel and other things. Skippy Africanus, in general, can you describe how the RN developed ISW doctrine pre-World War II? When did they have exercises first for ISW? They had exercises right the way through from World War I onwards. They were constantly practicing it. The trouble was under the conditions they practiced in the rules, their ASDIC was considered more successful than it actually turned out to be in real war. So that caused a bit of a misapprehension on that. Right. So. Thank you very much. I hope you all had a nice evening. It's now been 2 hours and 45 minutes. So I am going to go off and get some food. As I said, I'm hungry. And I hope you enjoyed this evening. Thank you for taking part. Thank you for watching. And I will post the other Admirals and with my reviews on them later on. I will get that up. Okay. All right. Take care. Thank you very much for watching. Please keep sharing. Please keep subscribing. Please, if you do want to see the slides, they're on the Patreon account. So there is a link somewhere on the main page. And please do go for them. Okay? Right. Thank you very much. And thank you. Salim Sheikh, thank you, Doc. It's 3:40 a.m. here. Thank you for watching, Salim. You're very, very kind. And thank you. Thank you very much for your thank yous. And as I said, please keep sharing because I am now working on seeing how far and how many subscribers I can get because I like sharing history. Thank you very much and thank you for watching. Take care.